5, The Fan.
All right, I'll start off by letting everyone know that Daniel Jones will be our starting quarterback this season. I thought the competition in training camp was great by both of those guys. I thought they both competed really hard, and it was good to see them cheering for each other and battling the way they did. And you guys heard me talk about the consistency, and that's really what I was looking for. And really the operation at the line of scrimmage, the checks, the protection, the ball placement, the completion percentage, I think all that played a factor in it. I think Daniel did a great job doing that, and I think AR has made strides in that area, but I do feel that, he still needs to continue to develop in those areas. And I had a chance to talk to both of them this morning. They were both great. AR was great. He knows that he still needs to develop and learn in those areas, and he knows that he's one play away. Let those guys know, let the team know this morning. The team's very supportive of Daniel, but also supportive of AR and his new role, and he's got to attack it the right way, and then we'll go from there.
Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Colts, making the announcement that we were all awaiting, and admittedly, and I will go back to it and say it once again, I was like that goldfish in the Faith No More video, flip-flopping all over the place on which way I thought this was going to go. And open disclaimer, I had said, a while ago that Daniel Jones was going to be the starter. And then as the more I thought about it, I thought, if there is a tie, it goes to the incumbent. If on the field, these two guys, neither one has separated themselves, it goes to the incumbent. And I also said, when it comes to Daniel Jones, if Daniel Jones is the week 1 starter, it's not going to be because he won the job. It's going to be because Anthony Richardson did not hold on to it. And on the field, if you look at Richardson in the preseason, I think 8 of 14, 94 yards, somewhere in there. On the field, I thought they were even. But what we found out just moments ago, within the last couple of hours here in Indianapolis, Indiana, what we found out is this. I think last year, the helmet tap was the end. When Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet, took himself out of the game, and then afterwards said, I'm not going to lie, I was tired. I think the naivete of all that is expected of a franchise quarterback and taking himself out in that moment, Shane Steichen, a guy who has played quarterback, saw that and said, I've got to go with another option. And what we saw earlier, that to me is the biggest piece of news in all of this. It's not the fact that Daniel Jones is getting a second opportunity after the New York Giants released him in November of last year. It's not the fact that Daniel Jones, who was a first-round pick by the New York Giants, who played himself into a big contract and then tapered off from there, it's not the fact that the Colts see this huge flash of a resurgence in Daniel Jones. It's not the fact that Anthony Richardson has only started in, 15 games, and that injury has set him back, and injury cost him some of the off-season practices because the shoulder started to get sore again, and we were told that wasn't an issue. It's none of that. This is what happened in the last 2 hours in this town with the professional sports franchise. What happened was you had a head coach who was told by the general manager that he had the authority to decide on who the starting quarterback is going to be. And that head coach had one of those two options that he could go with, be the guy that represents the most important draft pick in the tenure of his general manager. And he went against it. And he went elsewhere. And he went with a guy that a different franchise scouted out and selected in the draft and then dispatched over the guy that his general manager was trusted was the pick that was going to be the face of this franchise. And yes, I understand this. And let's go back to this. Shane Steichen was in the room when Anthony Richardson was drafted. Shane Steichen was part of the brain trust when Anthony Richardson was selected. Shane Steichen was part of the process of vetting out Anthony Richardson and figuring out whether Richardson or C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young or Will Levis or someone else was going to be the face of this franchise. But let's keep this in mind. No matter what line of work you're in, whether you're an architect, whether you're an attorney, whether you are a doctor, whether you are a salesperson, or whether you're a radio host, or if you are Ella Rhodes from WTHR Channel 13, who is kind enough to spend some time in here with us today, any of those jobs, and I've been there myself, when you are getting your very first opportunity in your dream career, your voice is different. You can say Shane Steichen was in that room. You can say Shane Steichen was a part of the process that selected Anthony Richardson. But was he? Because think about this. Shane Steichen is a guy who played quarterback, was a coach, and had never been a head coach in the National Football League. A head coach in the National Football League, the preeminent job for anybody in football that's not a player. A head coach in the NFL. There's only 32 of them, right? He gets his opportunity in February of 2023. And they say, do you want to coach our franchise? Absolutely. Yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in. What do I need to? I'm all in. I'm moving right now. Where are the Mayflower trucks? Bring them from Philly. I'm there. Great. Keep in mind, 2 months from now, we're going to be drafting a quarterback. We're going to be drafting a quarterback that is going to be the face of our franchise. You on board with that? I'm on board. Yeah, I'm good. Yes, whatever I need. Okay. Now, do you really think in that situation, if you're getting your first job at an architecture firm, if you're getting your first job at a radio station, if you're getting your first job in a sales position, you're getting your first job at a television station, and you're getting it for the very first time, and you're sitting there in the interview, and you know that you are going to be part of an important decision, and you're going to be in the room, are you going to speak up and speak out? Okay, we're going to hire you, but this is the guy that we think you're going to mold at quarterback. You cool with that? Is Shane Steichen at that point, before like literally he's even met with the HR person to find out who his insurance coverage is he going to say, like, you know what, guys, actually, I think you're wrong? Of course he's going to go along with it. And he may well have been salivating over the prospect of Anthony Richardson and the ceiling of Anthony Richardson, the potential of Anthony Richardson, the athleticism of Anthony Richardson, and the promise of Anthony Richardson. But something has happened between then and now. And I don't think it's anything that's happened in terms of throwing mechanics. I don't think it's anything that's happened in terms of decision-making on the field, per se. I think the helmet tap finally gave Shane Steichen the public backing, the public explanation, the public justification for what came down today. And that is that Shane Steichen began to believe that Anthony Richardson did not have the leadership ability and maturity about him. Not makes him a bad guy, but just didn't have the intangibles that go into being a quarterback for an NFL franchise. And so Shane Steichen with the helmet tap thought, okay, I'm writing that down. People are going to remember that. And he started questioning whether or not that was the guy. And if you look over the course of this process in this preseason, Shane Steichen made it very clear to anybody that would listen and interpret and read through the tea leaves. Shane Steichen was making it very clear, listen, in this situation, I feel like there's more to it than what you folks are seeing. I've got to go with the way they walk down the hall in the complex. I've got to go with the way they greet people in the locker room. I've got to go with what happens in the meetings, what happens in the film room, what happens in the huddle. And Shane Steichen knows that better than I know that. Shane Steichen knows that better than Eddie Garrison knows that. Shane Steichen knows that better than Ella Rhodes knows that. He's there. He's the one that has to make that decision. And today he made that decision, and what he decided was that the most critically important decision in the tenure of Chris Ballard was the wrong one. And Chris Ballard swung and missed. And when Shane Steichen said, I don't want this to be a short leash, what he is saying is, barring injury to Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, and the experiment is over. Now, in the greatest source of irony in all of this, and I love everything about this, I get into work today. I know that we're going to get a lot of reaction from you folks. I know that we're going to talk about it over the course of today. I know that we're going to break this down. We're going to decipher it. We're going to read every single overturn, every single leaf, every single stone about this decision, one that I personally believe is a damning decision towards the upper brass of the Indianapolis Colts. I don't mean ownership. I mean the upper brass. But in talking about that and thinking about that and plotting it out in my mind as I'm driving down today, and I'm driving down Capitol, I'm driving in, and I look up at Lucas Oil Stadium. I look up at Lucas Oil Stadium, and I see DeForest Buckner. And I see Quentin Nelson. And I see Kenny Moore. And I think to myself, I don't see the quarterback. And I look at the JW Marriott, and I see the players that are looking down over Indianapolis to promote this year's Colts season, and I don't see a quarterback. Because this is a franchise that didn't have enough confidence in the quarterback 3 years ago they drafted to be its face, to put it publicly as the face of anything. And then I notice in Lucas Oil Stadium as I'm driving in, the roof's closed. Roof's closed today. And I think the roof just closed on the experiment of the guy that was going to be their franchise. And I walk in, and in a moment of brilliance, I greet Eddie Garrison. And I look at Eddie Garrison, and Eddie Garrison's like Scotty Johnston, our coworker, that every day wears some sort of a sports gear that is symbolic of what's going on in the world of sports. You see Scotty Johnston in the hallway, and he's wearing some Seattle Mariners jersey, and you're like, why is Scotty wearing a Seattle Mariners jersey? And then you read in the paper that it's like the 110th anniversary of when Seattle first hosted a night baseball game in, 19-aught whatever. And you think, well, Scotty's pretty sharp. Eddie Garrison today. Eddie, I would like for you to divulge to our fabulous audience. Those that can't see you on the YouTube, can they see you on the YouTube?
No.
Do you want to come around here and let everybody see you and say hello on the YouTube channel?
No, I'm good.
Do you want to stand up and let Ella get a shot of you?
I'm good.
From WTHR?
I don't want my head to take up the entire shot.
Eddie Garrison is going down with the ship. Eddie Garrison defines loyalty. Eddie is like, no, I'm telling you right now, I love the underdog story, says Eddie Garrison. Eddie, your shirt today is?
It's a Colts shirt. What are you talking about?
Eddie Garrison's wearing his Colts shirt. Can I please ask what that Colts shirt is, Eddie Garrison?
It's just got a number and a name on it.
Mm-hmm. And what is that?
Anthony Richardson.
Eddie Garrison has put aside his Beanie Baby collection for his collectible that is the Anthony Richardson shirt in Indianapolis.
I didn't have those.
Ella, thank you, by the way. It was very nice meeting you. Ella Rhodes from WTHR, who didn't get a shot of Eddie Garrison's Anthony Richardson shirt.
I literally just grabbed it. I was running a little bit behind this morning. I was like, I just did laundry last night. It was in my hamper. I was like,
we knew it was going to be sometime this week.
Yeah.
We didn't know when. And Eddie, the bottom line is this. People are going to ask our reaction. And my reaction is two things. Number one, there are two ways that you can look at Chris Ballard in this situation. The first is that you can say Chris Ballard, as I just said, that this is an indictment on his most important selection. And it is. The other is that you can say Chris Ballard gave the authority and the autonomy to his head coach to make this decision, which by all account is the case. And there is some truth to the fact that good leadership is defined by trusting the people that you have brought in to make decisions and to support those decisions. And in this case, Chris Ballard brought in Shane Steichen, gave him this authority, and now has, by all accounts, said, it is in your court. You make this decision. And that decision was made. And that decision is that Shane Steichen, not by design, not by intent, not with malice, but Shane Steichen just essentially, and I know people can say, Jake, Richardson's still on the roster. Ballard has been adamant that Richardson is, and he may still be their quarterback next year. But Daniel Jones is on a one-year deal, and if Anthony Richardson is indeed going to be your franchise quarterback moving forward, he has to have reps. And instead of reps, he's going to sit and watch. And he got hurt in that play against Baltimore, and what did I say then? He denied himself repetition because he didn't have recognition. He didn't recognize a blitz coming from Baltimore, and it knocked him out of that game. And he now was taken out of the game in two different scenarios over the course of the last few years. One, because he didn't recognize a defensive scheme coming his way, and one, because he didn't recognize the atrocity of tapping his helmet and then telling his teammates he was too tired to be at the end of a drive. And Shane Steichen looked at those two things and said, I would rather go with the guy that has less ceiling, but at least I know what I'm getting myself into with Daniel Jones, as opposed to Eddie, you've flown to Seattle, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Plenty of times.
When you fly, you don't have a choice of what airline you're going to go on, right? You don't have a choice of what aircraft you're going to go on. You buy your plane ticket, you get to the airport, you look out, and you're like, oh, there's our plane. Oh, gosh, that's a smaller one than I expected. Or, wow, that's a huge plane.
Right.
Okay? There are two ways when you get on an aircraft. If you were given your choice, would you rather have the big, more comfortable aircraft that can get you there faster, but there's a 40% chance of really bad turbulence throughout 40% of the flight? Or would you rather go with a smaller plane that might take a little longer to get there, but you're not going to have any turbulence whatsoever?
Probably plane 2.
You just picked Daniel Jones because Anthony Richardson gives you more pop, gives you more potential. But, man, that turbulence is rough. And it's after a while when you go through turbulence, you're like, I'm not doing this again. And that's exactly what happened. Eddie, give me your thoughts on this decision from Shane Steichen.
I thought, Jake, the pendulum has swung so far back and forth with this whole entire situation. Like you said, it went from the moment the Colts signed him to, I forget the exact number, $13 million or whatever the exact, $16 million. I can't remember the exact number that he was signed, but I remember when they signed him, you and I both like, hey, this is a contract you don't give a typical backup quarterback. This is a contract that you give somebody to prove it on a one-year deal that you can become and be a reliable starting quarterback. To then, training camp starting to come around, and even before that with OTAs and Richardson having to be shut down because of shoulder soreness, it just screamed to everyone, hey, set it, forget it, Daniel Jones is starter. Well, training camp comes around, Chris Ballard says this is still an open competition, and what time he missed talking about Richardson didn't really matter. So then training camp starts happening. You see Daniel Jones be Daniel Jones. He's not really pushing the ball down the field. He's being the guy that everyone has seen him be at New York. And then Anthony Richardson shows some life of improvement, shows that his accuracy is improving, his decision-making is a little bit better. Next thing you know, Jake, we swing the pendulum back in favor of Richardson. And then Shane Steichen has the comments after preseason game 2 on Saturday against Green Bay that everything will be taken into accord when making the decision on who the quarterback will be. And that was the first telltale sign of where this quarterback competition is going. And now it is fully in the hands of Daniel Jones. And I understand that Shane Steichen said that Daniel Jones would be the starter for the entirety of the season. Shane Steichen also said last year that Joe Flacco was going to be the starter for the rest of the season when Joe Flacco took over for Anthony Richardson after the head tap.
Play for me again, Eddie. I want to play one more time the clip that we started the show with because there's an important thing to decipher here. This is Shane Steichen earlier today.
All right, I'll start off by letting everyone know that Daniel Jones will be our starting quarterback this season. I thought the competition in training camp was great by both of those guys. I thought they both competed really hard, and it was good to see them cheering for each other and battling the way they did. And you guys heard me talk about the consistency, and that's really what I was looking for. And really the operation at the line of scrimmage, the checks, the protection, the ball placement, the the completion percentage. I think all that played a factor in it. I think Daniel did a great job doing that, and I think AR has made strides in that area. But I do feel that he still needs to continue to develop in those areas. And I had a chance to talk to both of them this morning. They were both great. AR was great. He knows that he still needs to develop and learn in those areas, and he knows that he's one play away. Let those guys know, let the team know this morning. Team's very supportive of Daniel, but also supportive of AR and his new role, and he's got to attack it the right way, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Two things here. Number one, that sounds to me like a head coach that is still imploring and desperately searching for a way to deliver a message to his young quarterback. That sounded a lot more like, Anthony, please get the message, please get the memo, than it did, wow, Daniel blew us away. But then later when he said, I don't want this to be a short leash, he's the guy. Daniel Jones is the guy. Then that to me is Steichen basically saying, it's not going to happen. But several people asked me about this question. When he says Anthony has to continue to develop, the checks at the line, the overall reads, the progressions, some of the plays that Anthony Richardson made in the preseason. He had a fabulous throw at one point, I believe it was to an A.D. Mitchell. Beautiful ball, right where it needed to be. Put it right where only the receiver could get it. Perfect pass. But kind of a dangerous pass because the defense was right there. And when he threw it, he had, I believe it was Tyler Goodson, wide open. Wide open. Sitting there reading a program, eating one of those Colt horseshoe pretzels that looks like a bit of a culinary mistake.
I'm very confused on how that is a culinary mistake, Jake. I mean, if you are having, that sort of shape and texture, then you need to go to a doctor.
So I believe it was Goodson.
It might have been Giddens.
Or Giddens, but it was one of the backs that was wide open, and in 99% of all cases, it was the immediate and obvious answer. And yes, while it is fabulous that he, talking about Anthony Richardson, had the arm talent, I'm using air quotes, to make the play that he did, it still overshadowed the fact that he made the wrong read. He read it incorrectly. And he put the ball into a situation and a position that increased the danger of a takeaway as opposed to taking what the defense was giving him because he didn't go through his proper reads and progression. And those are the things that I think that Shane Steichen sees as a nuanced mind and somebody who is seeing it in totality above and beyond what we're simply seeing on television or on the field. Those little things. And I think Steichen just thought, I'm out of time. I'm a head coach in the NFL. I need to win now. Which of these two, I realize which one might give this franchise the best potential for 2027. I need to win in 2025. And which of these guys gives me the better chance to do that now? But he did say something in there that I think people misunderstood, and it requires explanation. And I'll tell you exactly what it was and where you probably misread it when we come back, and I want your phone calls as well. Your reaction, Daniel Jones, starting quarterback, Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson, carries a clipboard. 239-1070 is the telephone number on a packed Newsy Tuesday here. Query & Company on the Fan. One of the things that Shane Steichen said about Anthony Richardson is that Richardson has to continue to develop, but he knows that he is one play away. And I think there are a lot of people that heard that and thought that what he meant was that Richardson was that close, that it was just a one-play difference. What he means by that is he is one play away, meaning one play where something happens to Daniel Jones, and thus Anthony Richardson is again the starter. And I think we can safely say that at some point this year, Richardson will be in that position. That's just the nature of the NFL. That's not an indictment on the line, on Jones, anything. I mean, the reality is very few franchises are able to go the course of the year with a quarterback that is available for every single game. We've seen it in this town, and it's certainly these days almost unheard of. 239-1070 is the telephone number. I am curious your reactions, your questions, your comments, your disagreements, your agreements, whatever it may be regarding this news, the big news. Daniel Jones is your starting quarterback in 2025 for the Indianapolis Colts. And we will go over the history of, I talk a lot about precedent, right? The precedent of where this franchise is. Eddie, I will let you select where we begin with our phone calls.
Hey, it's Paul. I'm the director of giddiness, and you're feeling giddy on Query and Company on the Fan.
That means Paul the mailman, Giddy Paul, joins us. Hi, Paul.
How you doing, Jake?
I'm good.
All right, I'm just going to get into it. This right here, this decision has set the Colts franchise back because I truly believe they're going to start the season now 0-2, go to Tennessee, and possibly get beat, and looking up at the rest of the NFL. The Colts have showed me they're no longer trendsetters in the NFL, that they're followers. Because Tom Brady won when he went to Tampa Bay. They tried the old quarterback route. That didn't work out. So then they went and drafted Anthony Richardson because it was like, we got to start over, so let's start over. We did that. He got hurt his first year, came back next year, and he regressed as far as his completion percentage, but he's still 8-7 as a starter. So what do? They go out and they see Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield had these resurrection careers, so they go and pick Daniel Jones. Yes, Daniel Jones is consistently 64 to 68% completion percentage, but he's only passing 6 to 10 yards down the field, and he doesn't include the rest of the team. You had Malik Neighbors last year, and you could not go to him, which means this year Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell are going to be non-factors on this Colts offense.
Listen,
so all
Paul, you touched on one thing, and I appreciate it, Paul. Alec Pierce is in a contract year, and if you're Alec Pierce, you're probably happy at this point that you're still going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Worked out differently than the Bernard Ryman situation. If you're Alec Pierce, you're like, man, I don't know. I want my options open now. Reggie. What's up, Reggie?
Nothing much, man. Usually I call in the JMV, but I've been listening to your show lately, and people say I'm a homer because I'm always for the home teams, but I'm still cheering for Daniels, but I think AR should be the one starting because he has more upside. Like your last caller said, he just throws a better long ball. We had a guy that throws short passes, and it never got us anything because they would just sit on those short passes, sit on the running game, and you couldn't get the ball out. So I'm still cheering for the Colts, but I think AR is going to have to stay ready and be ready to go because I think he will get a shot sooner than later.
Hey, Reggie, let me say this. I appreciate the insight. It's good insight. I know you're a regular caller on JMV's show. John and I are tight. He's a great teammate, a great coworker. We get along well, and so I'm happy to have you on for this show as well to warm you up for the big show. All right?
I was on the road coming back. I wanted to call in because I knew some of those questions about fantasy football, but I can't make it next Saturday to the draft. So I was a little disappointed I couldn't get in on that.
Well, Reggie, listen, we'll meet up sometime, I promise, but be safe on the road. But I appreciate you joining the company for sure. Mike, your thoughts?
Hey, Jake, I love your show, watch it all the time. I'm very disappointed that AR did not win the job, but at the same time, I think it's Shane Steichen and Vic Ballard, but the GMs saving their jobs, because when Daniel Jones failed, they can bring AR in, and AR is going to look a little bit better than he did last year, and they're going to say, well, hey, he's doing better, so can we get one more year? But I'm still Colts Nation, and I hope they do well.
Man, I'll tell you what, Mike, it's an interesting one, because if Richardson, and I do think, realistically, you'd have to look at it and say at some point Richardson's going to get a shot this year. Even though Shane Steichen, and I want to play this, Eddie, we have Shane Steichen answering the question as to whether or not this is a fluid situation or one in which he believes that this decision of Daniel Jones is what he wants to be firm for the course of the year.
Look, he's our starting quarterback for the season. I don't want to have a quick leash on that. I feel confident in his abilities.
Okay. Now, he also, before we get back to calls here, talking about Shane Steichen, he elaborated even more so than that, did Steichen, on the situation. Why now? Here we are before you even go into preseason game number 3. Shane Steichen, why the decision now in Daniel Jones?
Well, I think, we got 3 weeks for our first game, and I think it's fair to the team that they know who their starting quarterback's going to be, and they get those reps this week in practice and the following week and getting into game week. So there's just clarity at that position.
Okay. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. It's an indictment on the decision of Chris Ballard, in my opinion. Brian, your thoughts?
Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. Listen to these names of quarterbacks since Luck has retired. What more is it going to take to get rid of Chris Ballard? He needs to be fired immediately. Enough of this.
Now, is that because would you be saying the same thing? And I'm not saying that argumentatively. I'm curious. If Anthony Richardson was the starter right now and that's who they were going with, would you be saying the same thing? Or do you see that as an indictment on the fact that when it finally came down to him making that decision, he picked the wrong guy?
I would still want Chris Ballard fired. At least if Anthony Richardson was named the starter, maybe there's a little bit of hope that he can turn the corner right now. Richardson is a huge, gigantic bust. You can't whip with the 4th overall pick as a GM to still have any credibility. There's no trust. You just can't trust Ballard to make the correct decision about anything.
By the way, you did forget Sam Ehlinger, Nick Foles, and Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco. I think you forgot Flacco also. Just to be fair.
Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew, Jacob Eason, Sam Ehlinger, they're all bums. He doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. He doesn't.
Brian, I appreciate it. Austin, what's up?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm not exactly going to be saying anything that anyone else wouldn't be saying today, but this QB carousel situation is just laughably embarrassing. I don't even want to call myself a Colts fan anymore, because whenever we get given a bit of hope, it gets slammed right in our face. And I'm tired of pretending Steichen's a smart guy. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I haven't seen anything besides when we signed him to that contract when he first came here that indicates that he's anything above average.
Here's the thing. I think we're going to find out now whether or not Steichen is, because
that's right.
Because now, again, I'm going to go back to Austin, and I appreciate the call and the thought. Shane Steichen was hired as the head coach in February of 23. He's hired as the head coach. And I want you to put yourself in the position of Shane Steichen. Here you are interviewing for the head coaching position of an NFL franchise for the first time in your career. And that franchise says to you, hey, one of the things that is a key part of this and why we are intrigued by you is because you are an offensive mind, and we're about to hand the keys over to a young quarterback for the first time since Andrew Luck's retirement. We finally have kicked the can long enough, and we are going to select and draft a quarterback. Are you on board with the development of a young player we draft? Steichen is looking at an opportunity for the first time as a head coach in the NFL. Naturally, he's going to go, yeah, I'm on board. Sign me up. So then he sits there, and 2.5 months later, he's in the war room with Chris Ballard, and Chris Ballard is saying, I got C.J. Stroud, I got Bryce Young, I got Will Levis. I got Anthony Richardson. I realized that Shane Steichen surely had opinion, and maybe his opinion was that Richardson was the guy that most intrigued him. But in that situation, when you are brand new as a first-time head coach in your dream job, and you're 2 months removed from saying everything necessary in the job interview and agreeing to it, are you really going to speak your mind, or are you going to go along with whatever it is? Yeah, boss, it's a great decision. Yeah. And then the helmet tap happened. And then Chris Ballard said, I am going to put the ball in your court. And Shane Steichen said, okay, I've been here long enough now. I'm the established head coach, and you've given me that autonomy. I'm going to indirectly say you picked the wrong guy. Cindy Denise, who got us to number 24 for our female listeners. Hi, Cindy Denise. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I'm okay. How does it sound I am? Does it sound like I'm having an okay day? I don't want to sound like I'm down.
Honestly, I've just turned on the radio about 10 minutes ago, so I haven't been listening very long, but I can tell that this is definitely on everybody's mind.
Correct. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah. I think the Colts need to
What were you doing, Cindy, until 10 minutes ago, just out of curiosity? I'd like to know the excuse for your tardiness.
Okay. I was picking up my son.
Okay. Is your son in the car now?
Yeah, I'm opening the door. He's asking for his iPad. You got to go, buddy. I can't. No iPad today.
So
sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so your thoughts on the quarterback deal?
I think that the whole entire organization needs to be overhauled from top to bottom. I'm just not happy with the way things have been going for a while. And the Anthony Richardson, they've been patient. I understand that, they've got a lot invested in him, but I'm just, you just can't be patient this long when it comes to, this many seasons of not delivering.
You know what, Cindy, you know what happened here? Let's be honest. You know what happened?
What happened?
Shane Steichen had Anthony Richardson all ready for his first day of school. He thought everything was good to go, and then he dropped him off, and then Anthony Richardson came walking back to the car and said, actually, he still needs his iPad. And he's like, we went over this. You know what I mean? Like we went over this. How many times do I need to tell you? You're responsible for grabbing your own iPad and taking it into school. And yet there's always that curveball that reminds you that you're the parent, right? And when you are the coach and you have a franchise quarterback, eventually you need that quarterback to understand that your parenting job should be over with, and now you are trusted to go into school and have all your ducks in a row. And I think Shane Steichen felt like Anthony Richardson did not, and that was the problem. Stephen Holder, by the way, 2:30 today. We'll continue this discussion and a look back at how we got here next. Want to thank everybody who has texted in, both to my phone and then as well at 239-1070. That includes Steve, Mark, Colleen, Raymond. Actually, one person doesn't have their name on here, but it just says, you are understating Steichen's role in picking AR. The head coach is brought in to be the CEO of the team, and AR was picked based on the success Steichen had with Jalen Hurts. I get it. But again, now that he has more authority, even with that, Steichen now has opted against him. But several people chiming in, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible, because this is a decision that has obviously big impact on the Colts. And if you look historically, and Steve, Jason, Chris, Don, going to get to you here off the top, I promise. But if you look historically at the Colts, and somebody asked me earlier, they're like, Jake, has it been like this in this franchise before? Here is the difficult thing. When the Colts first arrived in Indianapolis, and I'm saying this just for people who may not have been around or may not have followed the team back then. When the Colts first arrived in Indianapolis, they were not a good franchise. I mean, that's a big reason why they left Baltimore, is because the Colts wanted a new stadium from the city of Baltimore, and there was a lot of hesitation amongst the Baltimore, the mayor. The mayor wanted them to stay, but the taxpayers didn't want to build them a new stadium and renovation and whatever, because they had been, a bottom barrel franchise in the later years of Bob Irsay in Baltimore. So when they arrived here, they had Mike Pagel, Art Schlichter, Mark Herman. And Schlichter was the guy that was going to be the guy. He had been a prodigy at Ohio State. He was a top draft pick, and he had personal demons that did him in, obviously. And then in 86, they drafted Jack Trudeau in the second round, and Trudeau was a solid player. Solid. And, of course, the thought was, well, this guy's a solid player, but he's a solid backup Jack. They drafted Chris Chandler in 88, also, I believe, in the second round, and he was another solid, promising young player. But once they had Chris Chandler, and Trudeau was still in the mix, and then finally Jim Irsay fell in love with Jeff George. Understandably, Jeff George had been the number one high school player in America. He had the $1 million arm. By the time he got to Illinois and found stability underneath him, he skyrocketed through his workouts leading up to the draft when he announced his departure from Illinois. And the Colts traded Andre Rison, Chris Hinton for Jeff George. And so Jeff George comes on board, and there is your first Indianapolis Colt franchise quarterback. But they had traded away their best lineman. They traded away their best receiver. They eventually made the trade for Eric Dickerson, who was a good teammate for George, but Ron Meyer wanted to run a wishbone, and they never found any solidarity. They had coaching change after coaching change and coordinator change after coordinator change, and George had a holdout, and it just did not go well. So Jeff George was traded away, and then they went the veteran quarterback route. Jim Harbaugh had success for certain. Don Mikowski was the guy that everybody thought was going to be, the reawakened, the Sam Darnold of the early 90s. He had been a great quarterback in Green Bay, or at least a very good one, and found kind of magic in a bottle here for a short time. And then Harbaugh kind of won the job. Craig Erickson was brought in. He was another one that had been a big college star. People thought that would be a guy but Harbaugh, the KG veteran, beat him out. Then Harbaugh eventually got hurt. Paul Justin took over. Harbaugh left to go to Baltimore. They had a season where, with Paul Justin and Kelly Holcomb starting, and Harbaugh shelved for the better part of the end of the year. Then they got the number one pick in the draft, and that's when they drafted Peyton Manning. And you know the rest from there. And I really do believe that between Peyton Manning and then the transition straight into Andrew Luck, because it had been nearly 30 years since the Colts had to groom and develop a franchise quarterback, I think they and I'm talking about Jim Irsay, rest his soul, but I think that Jim Irsay, because of the fact that he, in his mind, when you draft a quarterback in the top 5, he was still thinking about the Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning success and underestimated the difficulty in a young quarterback learning that position. And so they handed the keys to Anthony Richardson prematurely because that's what they had done for Luck and for Manning. And those guys are different. Young quarterbacks are a lot more Anthony Richardson than they are Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. Meaning for the best of the best, the Joe Montanas of the world. You know, most franchise quarterbacks, it takes a while. Patrick Mahomes didn't come out of the womb as Patrick Mahomes in his NFL career, nor did Josh Allen. It takes a while. And the Colts assumed because they'd been through it with Luck and with Manning that you just hand the keys, you turn them, and you're off and running. And did they put the proper pieces around Anthony Richardson? Did they give him everything necessary? Or did the injuries do him into the fact that he could not get that stability, could not get that footing, and that's where we are? But I will again go over what I think this means. And Theo, Don, Steve, the rest of you, I want continued conversation about this because it is a major, major decision today. Daniel Jones, the starting quarterback in Indianapolis. Continued reaction and conversation. But before we bring in Theo and Don, Steve, read some of your texts as well at 239-1070. Let's go back to what happened earlier today and what I believe this means.
Are you talking about Rick Carlisle getting extended by the Pacers, Dick?
That is the least surprising news of all, is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Carlisle in the mix for how much longer?
No real actually details on that. Just Mark Stein and I think James Boyd confirming Stein's report that Carlisle has agreed to an extension.
Which is good news, obviously. And Carlisle, that's what the Pacers have done. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Eddie, because whether people want to know this or not, or believe this or not, I should say, the Pacers and the Colts obviously have somewhat of a symbiotic relationship within this market. And they support one another. And, I realized that the final tweet of Jim Irsay was something about the Pacers and the Knicks game. And, there is definitely cross-promotion and support. But there is also just a natural competitive nature of it as well, of wanting to be the dominant talking point in town or the dominant love interest in town. And the Pacers not long ago were in the situation where they had to do a retool and a rebuild. And they had this Domas Sabonis and Miles Turner, and that was the way that they were kind of going through those two guys. And they decided they needed to go in another direction, and they quickly turned it around by going out and making those trades. And they essentially said, this is going to be a process, and we need you folks to be aware of it and be patient and understanding. And it did not take long. And I think there was a lot of internal peace that came for Pacer fans of knowing that Rick Carlisle as the head coach was this face of stability and familiarity that as long as he was there, you could trust the direction. And Kevin Pritchard has obviously developed that for himself as well, and Chad Buchanan. And frankly, Colts fans don't feel that. I realize Colts fans, many of them are Pacer fans. And the reason they don't feel that is because when the Colts eventually said, we've done our Sabonis-Turner efforts too long, with Carson Wentz and with Matt Ryan and with Phillip Rivers, we've done it. And Gardner Minshew, even though Minshew was with Richardson, but we've done that. We need to, our time is now, and we need you to be patient and understanding because we are ripping off the Band-Aid and starting over. And we're going to do it by finally trusting Chris Ballard to draft a franchise quarterback. And yes, you can certainly say, well, that wasn't a deep quarterback year. Okay. But that was the year they elected to take care of it. And that was the year that they decided to stand pat where they were and not move up to get a C.J. Stroud. Carolina moved up to get Bryce Young. And I'm not sitting here saying that Bryce Young is the NLBL. Don't misunderstand me. But it is the Colts who said, if Anthony Richardson, if we had the number one pick, this is still who we would have taken. And so the Colts said, we are now ripping up the Band-Aid, and like the Pacers when they started from scratch, they could have asked for patience and a window of time to let it simmer before we made a decision. But they are the ones that accelerated the timeline by saying, the time's now. We're handing the keys to the guy, and he's going to go start for us. And I think they would like to have that back. But either way, the big thing is that Chris Ballard, and yes, I know Shane Steichen was the head coach at the time that Richardson was drafted, but Chris Ballard kicked the can long enough, and in 2023, he finally had the opportunity to make the most important decision that a general manager makes in the National Football League, which is arguably the most important decision in all of sports, and that is selecting your quarterback because it's the most important position in sports. And Chris Ballard, who had already swung and missed on his first head coaching decision and selected and hired a guy that then backed out on him at the 11th hour and announced his hiring before they even had an ink on the contract done, and then got bailed out of that by Frank Reich being connected to Jim Irsay, and you end up with Frank Reich. And then he gets a quarterback from the veteran standpoint that is one that seemingly has a lot more tread on the tires in listening to Frank Reich in that regard, and goes with Carson Wentz, and the owner immediately says, I don't like this guy. So they go back to the drawing board, back to the veteran route, and finally it comes down to it where Chris Ballard has to make the signature and most important draft selection of his tenure. And in doing so, he drafts a quarterback that 3 years later, the coach that he gave and entrusted to make a decision rejected it and hit return to sender. That's how it looks. Whether that's the overstating it, maybe, but that's how it looks. How it looks right now is that Chris Ballard's most important selection in his tenure as the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, then 3 years later, his head coach. And I think this decision was made last year in the helmet tap. When Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet and then said, I was tired, I'm not going to lie, Shane Steichen looked at that and went, you have got to be kidding me. It's one thing to be too tired and take yourself out at the end of a drive. It's another one to admit it to the entire world and to tap your helmet and say you want out. That alone is inconceivable. What are you going to say to the guys in the trenches? What are you going to say to Michael Pittman Jr. and his bad back? What are you going to say to all these guys, that you were too tired? So right then, Shane Steichen began questioning the overall decision-making of Anthony Richardson. Not his character, not his morals, just his decision-making. He began questioning the decision-making of Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson in this preseason, they brought in Daniel Jones to push him, and Anthony Richardson goes out and goes 8 for 14 for 94 yards, and he doesn't do anything terrible, but he doesn't do anything to jump out at you. And you need repetition. And you were denied repetition if you're Anthony Richardson because you didn't have recognition of a blitz coming from Baltimore, and you separate your pinky and you're out, and now all of a sudden you're back to square one again. And if you're Shane Steichen, you're going, not again. I just needed you to recognize that play coming and keep yourself healthy because I've got to see what you can do. And then on top of that, game number 2, he gets in against Green Bay. He's playing against second and third stringers in defense. He had a play where he threw a perfect ball. Anthony Richardson did in one play what Anthony Richardson does. He threw a perfect pass right to, I think it was an A.D. Mitchell. But he threw a perfect ball right where it needs to be. Might have been Tyler Warren. He seamed it right through the defense. Man, it was a pretty ball. But it was a ball that had the possibility of a turnover, and he had his running back wide open in what should have been the read and the progression before that. But Richardson does this, and Richardson on that play did what that play perfectly encapsulated Anthony Richardson, because he showed you the tantalizing nature of who he can be with the arm strength, but he did so at the cost of the routine layup play that should have been the easier progression and the earlier progression that he looked over, and instead increased possibility of disaster. And those things I think Shane Steichen looked at, and Shane Steichen basically said, it's in the meeting room. What we don't know is what Shane Steichen sees. I remember when I was covering the St. Louis Rams. When I covered the St. Louis Rams, it was different. When I covered the St. Louis Rams, we had our entry card to Rams Park, and we could go wherever we wanted as media people. I'm not saying that's right, wrong, whatever. But I remember one time walking through Rams Park, and Trung Candidate, who was a top running back out of Arizona and had been a first-round pick for the Rams. I walked in, and Trung Candidate was walking on his hands and knees with his feet in the air on all fours going through the complex. And I said, what in the world are you doing? He said, oh, man, my hamstrings and my ankles get so sore out there that I walk like this to spare them. It's something that I saw due to the access inside the building that I would never otherwise see, and Trun Candidate never took off as a running back. I don't know if it's because of that or not. But you see things in the building that you can't see from the press box, the sidelines, or the television. And Shane Steichen had to evaluate this in totality, and in the totality, he saw those things that led him to believe that Daniel Jones was the better option. And in doing so, he offered a complete indictment on the most important decision that Chris Ballard, as a general manager, has had to make. Theo joins us at 239-1070. Theo has been patient. How are you, Theo?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. Your thoughts on the news?
Man, first of all, you are hitting some points, man. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head, man. I mean, you're doing it up. This is a big decision for Shane Steichen, and I do believe what you said is so correct, that if this proves to be the right decision by the coach, this is really an indictment on Ballard and his decision-making. And even with that, Ballard, I believe, took the best quarterback left in that draft class. And the Colts were tired of being on the merry-go-round of old retread quarterbacks. So it was a tough situation for the organization overall, I believe. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, here's what I was going to say, Theo. I don't disagree with that. And you know what? I'll tell you another indictment of a decision of Chris Ballard. DeForest Buckner's a wonderful player. He's a great player, probably their best player. But DeForest Buckner, they sent a draft pick to San Francisco that Chris Ballard will privately tell you he contemplated using to take Justin Herbert. And he wouldn't be in this situation if he had gone with his gut instead of doing what at the time maybe you thought was a good decision. But now you have DeForest Buckner, and you have Quentin Nelson, and you have Michael Pittman Jr., and you have Jonathan Taylor, who are in their prime, and it's going to be completely wasted because you are still dilly-dallying around at the quarterback position because, and in the case of Buckner, it's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, I realize, because you wouldn't have him if you drafted Herbert. But right there, opting to not take care of the quarterback situation right there when you had a guy like Herbert in the availability to you and waiting and kicking that can further, Theo, is a further indictment of bad judgment.
Man, that's another great point. That's huge, really. I just want to, because I know you have a lot of callers to get to. As great as Peyton Manning was, he's a phenomenon. Like you said, Brady, these guys are just different. Peyton Manning's rookie season, he had 28 interceptions and 26 TDs. And then after that, he kind of took off. But Richardson is not he's not Peyton Manning. But on the flip side of that, when I look at, and I don't know what the reason is, Jones struggled in New York the way he did. Only thing I know is with all the bad stats, the misreads, and everything, Richardson went 8 and 7 as a starter on the team.
You're right. No, you're right about Jones that. But the problem is, Theo, and again, and I appreciate it, I think Steichen saw it as that roster had as much to do. They have a good roster. They do. And I agree. Theo, you make an outstanding point, and the point that you make is this, and that is the fact that even with that, Shane Steichen thought that there was a better option, which means it has to be a Trun Candidate situation if he saw something inside the building. Don has been patient as well. Don the Milkman. Milk
That's
does
right.
a body
Don
good. What's up, Don?
Man. You know what? You made my point on that 8 and 7 record. Everybody keeps saying it's due to the roster as much as it's due to Richardson. My thing is, I think they made the right choice because he does need to develop. Whether he's going to or not, we don't know. So I agree with the choice that they made. I only think I'm not so sure they're going to pick his 5th-year option up because he's not going to have enough reps in for them to make a decision like that, and that's going to be a big decision. So I think he's probably done here. I don't know for sure. But I do agree with the decision because he's just, you know what, there's bookworms out there and there's athletes, and I've played with both. And the bookworms are very good on the sideline, because they can hold the clipboard. They just can't play the game. Just because you can play the game don't mean you can hold the clipboard.
And that's
so
the thing, Don. I think what
that.
happens here, I think what we see to this point, it's not his fault. It's goodwill hunting. We're going to look at Anthony Richardson to a great extent, and we're going to say, it's not your fault, son. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Because it's not Anthony Richardson's fault that he was so athletically gifted that it allowed him to not have to go through all the progressions and reads and understanding of a quarterback. He didn't have to do those things. He didn't have to do those things for the better part of his career because he could just he fell out of bed and would rush for 7 yards or throw for 40. And so now you could certainly make the case now it's not his fault that never became a habit. You get what I'm saying with that, though. I mean, he is that athletically gifted, no question about it. And I think they failed him. I think they failed him by giving him the keys too early. Mike the bookie. Mike, what's
Jay,
up?
What's happening, my man?
How
you doing?
How are things in the bookie business, Mike?
Oh, things are booming. It's never been changes are happening amongst us that we've never seen before here in Indiana. It's going to be a really good thing for Indiana once they get these legal machines going in a lot of these fraternal clubs. So it's a new day here in Indiana.
All right, fair enough. Your thoughts on the quarterback competition?
Look, I've been saying this from day one. Why is it we can't have two quarterbacks? Where does it say in the football Bible you got to play one quarterback all the time? If we could just switch them out, put Jones in, put AR in, put Jones in. Steichen's supposed to be this quarterback whisperer, right? He's supposed to be the best quarterback coach ever. Could you imagine if we ran out two quarterbacks like that?
Mike, if you got two quarterbacks, you got none. Everybody – but here's the thing. That's a wheel that everybody's tried to reinvent, and it never works.
Never works, but it's never been done. But
no, it's been done. Dude, it's been done here. Are you kidding?
Well, not to the extent to where you switch them off every other play, where they get 50 snaps and he gets 50 snaps. Even straight down the middle.
Here's the thing, Mike. Listen, and I get it. I mean, kidding aside, and I appreciate the call. The problem with that is it just does not allow any camaraderie or chemistry amongst, like, the rest of the roster. The line, the receivers, the running back, whether you agree to it or not, whether you admit it or not, whether you understand it or not, I don't mean you personally, Mike. It is different from one quarterback to the next in terms of just the rhythm of what guys have to do. Jason, also been waiting patiently. Hey. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Jake. How you doing?
All right.
I heard Mike, and he was going down the same road I was a little bit. Here's the deal: AR is not the franchise quarterback. They're taking the gloves off of him. I think you're going to see him in the Wildcat here and there, and just run him because that's what he's good at. And they're not afraid of him getting hurt because Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback.
Fair. That's a fair point. Yeah, that's fair.
And it might open up his passes, and then he gets a better look and drops some dimes in. But I'm bullish this year. I think Jones makes better decisions. He's a little bit more predictable, and if you can get AR in there to just bulldoze on goal lines or other certain run situations and save Jones, I think it could work.
Situationally, I don't disagree, Jason. Thanks for the call. Situationally, I don't disagree, but I do think that going every other play, for example, almost impossible. Now, Adele Means and I did that at Eastwood, running plays in as the guard, but that's different. Todd, you're up. What's up?
Hey, I'll go rapid fire here, Jake. I might have missed this earlier. I was in the dentist chair, but one of the local guys put out a poll on X, and there was like 6,000 votes, and it was 90% Richardson, which astonished me, to be honest with you. I don't know if it was Adams or Atkins or it was it wasn't one of the major guys that are linked to a major media, but anyway. 6,000 votes and 90% were in favor of Richardson. Kind of surprised.
It's more upside, Todd. That's the thing, right? I mean, I think Richardson, again, I go back to, Richardson's the guy that there's no doubt about the fact that if they both hit their ceiling, you feel like you've seen the ceiling with Daniel Jones, but with Richardson, it's Jonathan Bender. You feel like you're totally fascinated and intrigued by what could be with him. But you have to have repetition to get there, and his own lack of recognition cost him repetition. Steve, we're going to flush these out here. Steve, what's up?
Which one?
Regular Steve first, Chiefs fan Steve next. Steve, what's up?
Jake, I hope you have a great time drinking Pabst in Milwaukee over the weekend. And
yes, sir.
Do you think Anthony Richardson knows who Bobby Knight is?
Good question. I would say yes, but probably doesn't totally understand the legacy of Bob Knight.
My point is that I think in Anthony Richardson's locker room, they should have that infamous Bob Knight quote about what happens when you sit on the bench. And, Jake, maybe you could remind all of us here in Indianapolis what that quote is from Bobby Knight.
I'll clean it up from Bob Knight's standpoint because Pat Knight, we know, is the one with the potty mouth, and then he said, blame my dad for it. But Bob Knight has often said that one of the greatest motivators is the bench, because when you sit on the bench, your butt sends a message to your brain, and the message to the brain is the bench is not very comfortable, and what do I need to do to get off of this? And then the brain says you need to work better, you need to pay better attention, and as a result of that, then butt decides that it no longer wants to be on the bench. And that might be what they're hoping for, that Anthony Richardson gets that message. But I believe, Steve, that this is the Colts saying, we have tried and tried and tried. I don't think that this is necessarily one that they're like, hey, we're doing this again to try to send a message. I think they feel like the messages have all been sent. Chiefs fan Steve, what's up?
What's up? Hey!
Yes!
Yes!
How we doing, Steve?
Doing good, Jake. How about yourself?
Oh, can't complain, man. Can't complain. A lot to talk about today.
Well, one thing you guys aren't mentioning is that Daniel Jones was a good quarterback when he had a good offensive line. The Colts got a good line. He had a good running back. They got a good running back. Wide receivers. The Colts got that. So you guys got to just, let's roll with this. This ought to be interesting.
Ought to be interesting is the easiest way to say it, Steve. And listen, you're a Chiefs fan, so you know. I mean, you sat through – I just did a radio hit in Kansas City yesterday, as a matter of fact, and said, you know, Chiefs fans know about waiting through, you know, Mark Vlasic and Elvis Gerbach and Steve DeBerg and all that goes into that before you finally landed on Mahomes and you strike gold. And the Colts were in a situation where drafting a franchise quarterback was pertinent, and they obviously, in that situation, they went with one, and it is my belief that what we saw today was the head coach indicting that decision and turning the page. And as I said earlier today, as I was driving down Capitol on my way into work, I looked up at Lucas Oil Stadium. I saw DeForest Buckner. I saw Jonathan Taylor. I saw Quentin Nelson, players in their prime. I didn't see a quarterback. I looked up at the JW Marriott. I saw all those guys. I didn't see a quarterback. I saw photos of guys in their prime. And I looked up at Lucas Oil Stadium and noticed the roof was closed. And I realized that the window in terms of the prime of those players is also closing. Maybe not this season, but you only have a window for so long. And that window's closing. And in my opinion, the time for Anthony Richardson in this town just closed as well with this decision today. And that's where we are. Scott Agnes will join us, talk a little Fever. We'll get the latest on Sophie Cunningham. And Stephen Holder joins us an hour from now, who, of course, was on top of this news from the get-go in terms of Daniel Jones being named the starter in Indianapolis. We will get back plenty in the second half of the show into the Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones conversation. We'll let you hear a little bit more from Shane Steichen as well. Scott Agnes joins us now from Fieldhouse Files. Obviously, the Fever in the midst of it right now. Interesting because they are getting set to close with 9 games to finish the regular season. The first 2 of those against the best team in the WNBA, Minnesota, and then another battle with the Lynx to finish things out. So 1/3 of their remaining schedule against Minnesota. Stephanie White, by the way, I believe tomorrow or Thursday will join the show. Scott, before we get to the talk about the Fever, and for that matter, the news about Rick Carlisle today, your thoughts on Daniel Jones being named the starter in Indianapolis over Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, it's a tough call, Jake, just because of the fact how much you have invested and how much you want for that to ultimately work out. The reality is it just seems like there's been too many missteps and things not go his way that it almost feels like they're giving him the patience he's needed, but it feels a couple years too late.
Yeah, it just feels like Steichen, with this decision, has said enough. And, Anthony Richardson, to me, Scott, you covered the Pacers for a long time, so you'll understand this analogy. But Anthony Richardson, to me, is kind of Jonathan Bender in the fact that he is a physical, unicorn that is so intriguing on what the ceiling is, but eventually you just had to turn the page because of the lack of availability at no fault of his because of the body, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Injuries just keep getting in the way. And, much like the Fever had with their latest injury over the weekend, it's here we go again. That's what it felt like, I think, when Anthony Richardson took his first snaps and got injured in that, first or second series in the preseason. It's like, seriously, can we not move beyond this and then truly evaluate you on a football standpoint? And so I don't think this rules him out or anything. Injuries or something's going to happen. He's going to get an opportunity this year. It's just, it feels like the decision's got to be made, right, about his future with an extension or picking up his option, rather, I think, here soon. And so everyone inside that locker room knows, and I think this is Steichen making it public.
Okay, Scott, let's get to the Fever here. Sophie Cunningham, we know the injury. MRI took place yesterday. My apologies for being naive to this. Do we know any more today than we did yesterday?
No, not just yet. I'm expecting an update to come here later on this afternoon, but it was clearly a right knee injury. It did not appear to be your traditional ACL, but it's something that, Stephanie White got emotional about it post-game. Players were like, yes, here we go again. And so I think they're fully prepared for her to miss time here. And so, look, the challenge becomes you're going on your 5th true point guard. Essentially. Now, Odyssey Sims has stepped up nicely in the last game, played more minutes than anyone, but when the first 3 went out, it was Sophie Cunningham who slid out of position to run point, and now she's going to miss time.
Do you think, Scott, that it will be difficult? Okay, actually, let me back that up to this question. Do you believe that Sophie Cunningham's timeline of games potentially missed impacts the timeline of return for Caitlin Clark?
No, absolutely do not.
Okay. So when Caitlin Clark returns, and you anticipate that will happen before the end of the regular season, am I correct in that?
I think the hope, the goal, the focus remains by the end of this month. I think the best case scenario, nothing official, these are just what in having conversations with people. I think best case scenario, Jake, is for her to resume practicing with this team by the end of this week.
Okay. When Caitlin Clark returns, will it be an adjustment for players to reacclimate to the pace and tempo that she will want to play?
Until Ari McDonald's latest injury, I probably would have said no, just because Ari had been fantastic in keeping what they had established early on. So much. I love the question because that's what we saw the first month and a half of the season when she was in, then out, then in and out. And there was just such a dramatic roller coaster like feel in a season that has been full of disruption. But I do think there will be a slight adjustment. The other side of it is, forget whatever adjustment it is, you're bringing back one of the best players in the league. And this team at this juncture, because of all these injuries, needs all the help that it can get.
Yeah, that's the thing. Caitlin Clark is undoubtedly Undoubtedly, the straw mixing the drink when she's on the floor. But I'll tell you, Scott, and Stephanie White, I think challenge is the wrong word, but I think they have played well. You know, Kelsey Mitchell, for example, has played really well. Aaliyah Boston, when they've had to kind of rely on that offensively, has played really well. And finding the balance of that and having Caitlin Clark continue to be a facilitator, I think they're better off when Caitlin Clark, who's a dynamic scorer, don't get me wrong, but when she is serving as facilitator first, I think we've seen the development around her now for that to be the primary role for Caitlin Clark. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree with the ball in her hands facilitating, absolutely. And she even said in her first question after being drafted, what's the thing we know you're shooting? What's the thing you're excited for everyone to see? It was her passing. It's her vision. It's her setting each other up. And then from that, by the way, that should open things up even more for her. So, yeah, absolutely with the ball in her hand, playing that fast-paced, trying to become that number one team in transition like they were when she is out there. And then the points will come. We know that. It's when she's forcing it maybe early in the game, like I need to get shots up, That, for the most part, I think they're better off going to the style in which you referenced.
Scott, also happening today on the other side of the building at Pacer Sports Entertainment is that of Rick Carlisle getting an extension. I don't know that we know the terms or the length of said extension, but was that something that we anticipated in terms of an announcement, or did it just kind of organically happen?
I think that just kind of organically happened. It's one of the last items of business that you look to, especially coming off the best season in NBA franchise history. It's something you reevaluate. And this is now the third contract in this latest stint that Rick Carlisle has gotten. The first one was for him. It got him back here. Notably, that one we knew the terms of, being about $7.5 million per year over 4 years. Well, now 2 years ago, in October, right before the season, a little later than right now, he got another extension. And what he really was proud about that one was it also gave an extension and a pay raise to his assistants, which he is valued in.
To coaches, right?
100%, especially for the face of coaches in this league, right? He's led the Coaches Association for 20 years. This is his last year doing that. He said it's time to pass the torch and all of that. And quite frankly, it's probably a job most don't want to do. Probably a lot of calls, a lot of busy work, but it's something he's embraced and willingly taken on as the face of coaches throughout the league. And among the many things they've done is I think retirement benefits, maybe health benefits, little things like that go a long way with these assistant coaches who just grind out tape and work with these players out on the floor. So more than maybe even his years and his money, I'm curious, did it directly reflect his coaching staff as well? Did they also get extensions to come along with that? And that's something we'll hopefully find out here soon.
Okay, Scott, to go back to the original point, though, Sophie Cunningham, we would expect some sort of news when, and has there been any offering whatsoever of hint as to what this timeline could be in terms of the injury?
No firm update. Got an MRI on Monday once the team got back to town. I'm expecting one here this afternoon. And I don't expect her to play anytime soon. But we don't have anything just yet. But you could just tell the look on her face, the pain that she was in, her sister coming to her defense right away.
I hate to say this, Scott, but the angle as well, right? I mean, this kind of that side shot to the knee angle typically is one that it harpens you back. You just look at it and you can anticipate that it's probably going to be a while.
It was that nasty collision, and now you're dealing with ligaments and tendons, and that's where that MRI, you really need to get the full scope of what that knee just went through. Absolutely.
Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files. Appreciate it as always, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake.
All right, Scott Agnes joining us on the program. We come back. Yes, in fact, there was a major decision regarding the quarterback situation for the Colts. There was also a big decision regarding the quarterback position and situation for another very prominent team that many of you follow. I'll tell you who and what next. 14 minutes before the hour of 2 o'clock. Daniel Jones is your starter week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. I am so smart and so prepared. I was a Cub Scout and then a Weeblo. Weeblo stands for We Be Loyal Scouts, but Cub Scouts, the motto was be prepared. And I'm always prepared. Were you a Cub Scout, Eddie?
Negative, Ghost Rider.
I was going into the Sullivan Hardware, shout out Pat Sullivan, and my buddy Freddie B, at 49th and Penn on Sunday.
Okay.
And as I was walking in, there was a table set up, and there was a very nice Boy Scout selling popcorn. And I walked in, and I looked over, and he's got the popcorn laid out, and he's sitting under a tent with he and his mom. And as I was walking, he stood up as I was passing the tent so that he would be standing like at attention as I passed, and then asked if I wanted to buy popcorn. And I said, well, how much is the popcorn? And he laid out the prices. And the bag of white cheddar popcorn, one bag of popcorn, $20. And I said, well, that's some pretty hefty camping you guys are doing. And he said, well, it is very good popcorn. So I bought the popcorn from the kid strictly because and he said he's an 8th grader at Northview Middle School. Didn't catch his name, but his attention to detail and just like the respect. First off, I respected that he was out there, selling the popcorn. And the fact that he was so mature in his presentation is where I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy this popcorn. So I did. But I've always been a guy that's prepared. So because of my preparation, I have before me on the wall here, I put up the Colts schedule so that in any time that somebody mentions it, I can just, boom, look over and bada bing, it's right there on the wall. Dolphins, Broncos, Titans. I mean, I got it right here in front of me, right? And we now know that in all of those games, barring some sort of an injury, that it is intended by Shane Steichen that Daniel Jones will be the starter, and it is not a short leash. Now, that's partially because Daniel Jones was like that Boy Scout. Shane Steichen, I think, liked the fact that he felt that Daniel Jones was just the more polished and the more mature in that situation. But he's not the only quarterback, Daniel Jones, to be named a starter in the state of Indiana, because Notre Dame,
that's right,
has named their starter. And it is redshirt freshman C.J. Carr. His grandfather is Lloyd Carr, of course, the former Michigan coach, but he beat out Kenny Menchny for the position, and Notre Dame now has, and I think it's going to be, I'm going to look in this camera and say this.
You're going to smile and do your little nod wink thing? It's a little creepy.
Hi there, my name is Jake Query.
Hello, Jake.
I host a midday radio show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I produce said Query and Company show.
Called Query and Company, in which Eddie Garrison is the president of the company.
That is me.
I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and as a result of that, my favorite athletic team for the better part of my childhood was the Indiana University Basketball Hoosiers of Bob Knight. Because when you grew up in Bob Knight's Indiana and born in 1972, that's the team you root for. And as a result of that, I became somewhat an Indiana football fan as well, but they were awful. Yeah, I saw Babe Laufenberg. I saw Steve Bradley. I remember Dave Schnell.
Antoine Randall.
Saw the Chris Ditto game against Penn State and Ohio State. Listen, I saw some glimpses here and there. But it was rough being an Indiana football fan. But when you grow up in Indiana during the time period that I did, you loved Indiana basketball, and you either loved or hated Notre Dame football. There was no in between. There was no, they're okay. There was no, take it or leave it. You loved or hated Notre Dame, and I hated them. And I know that offends a lot of you. I know that reverberates a shock and awe to many of you, especially many of you, my Northside friends that live near IHM. Your kids go to Chittard or Cathedral. I get it. You love Notre Dame. But part of why you love Notre Dame is because of the fun, the thrill, and the joy and the respect that comes with the fact that people either love them or hate them. When I say hate, I don't actually legitimately hate. You get what I'm saying. But that is the benefit that comes with the territory. That polarization is symbolic of being one of the most historic franchises in college football history. And I don't like Marcus Freeman. I don't like Marcus Freeman.
Is it because he's just so damn handsome?
Here's why I don't like Marcus Freeman.
He's a good-looking man.
I don't like Marcus Freeman because my college football team, I mean, growing up, like I said, I rooted for Indiana, but they were terrible. But I became a Clemson fan at a young age, and that was truly my football. Am I a reversible jacket guy? I don't know, because during my IU basketball fandom, sociopathic fan era, that was like the only sport and team that I was all in on, that and the Pacers. So I was a basketball guy, right? And then in my late teens and early 20s is when I really got into Clemson, and I've been a Clemson fan now for, some 30 years. And Clemson now has kind of a rivalry with Notre Dame, a little bit, if you want to call it that. But I didn't like anything about Notre Dame. I went up as a kid with my friends that went to St. Pius, and we did a field trip where we went up to Notre Dame's campus, and I bought a little fight song thing that played the fight song, and I tried to kind of get into them. And David Rivers was fun to watch, but I didn't like Dicker Phelps and the highlighter and all that, and I didn't like Notre Dame. Didn't like them. And as an adult, as a Clemson fan, big-time games against Notre Dame over the last couple of years, don't like Notre Dame. I don't like the little leprechaun running around. I don't like the dancing Irish music they do. I don't like any of it. And I don't. We just ask that you run for us a little bit there. And I don't like Marcus Freeman. And the reason I don't like Marcus Freeman is because I want to dislike everything about Notre Dame. And I like the guy. I like the guy. He seems like a cool dude. He seems like a coach that you would want to send your kid to play for. He's got a nice young looking family. His team they play disciplined football. They don't seem dirty. They don't seem arrogant. They're very likable. And I want to hate him because I've always hated him. And he's making them likable, and it's making me mad. Not to the point where I'm necessarily hoping that this decision to go with C.J. Carr at quarterback is going to make them like the elite of the elite and win them a national title. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I got a ton of respect for the guy. And last year during the college football, it was wonderful. One of the great, when I look back on the year 2025, was the Notre Dame Indiana game in December or January? It was in January, was it not?
I believe so.
Either way, when I look back on the last year, the last 12 months, one of the most surreal but also enjoyable things was going and watching that Notre Dame Indiana playoff game. We went to Kilroy's in Broadmoor to watch it. Shannon's like, Shannon didn't go to college, so she always has enjoyed kind of seeing what that college experience is like. And she'll tell you, she'll be like, I didn't go to, she moved from Denver to Indianapolis at the age of 19 and just immediately got into the workforce. And so that, we go back to things so she can kind of experience it. And she's like, I just want to see what it's like. So we went to Kilroy's when Indiana and Notre Dame were playing, and the atmosphere was great. It was fun. But sitting there watching this game, knowing that it was the college football playoffs and Indiana was in it, was totally bizarre and surreal, but man, it was so much fun. It was awesome. And I saw yesterday, I assume this is correct, but I had read yesterday that Indiana University this past fall had 73,000 applicants. 73,000 applicants, and I believe that may be the highest enrollment application total in the history of the university. And many people attribute that to the profile that came from college football and putting Indiana in that. And I'm like, yeah, that's why Dabo Swinney makes $11 million a year. That's why Nick Saban made $15 million a year. That's why Ryan Day makes whatever million a year. The Clemson campus, not to turn it into a Clemson conversation, but only to illustrate my point. I've been going to Clemson football games now for more than, I don't know, the better part of a decade and a half. And that campus, the first time I went on the Clemson campus was 2006 probably. And it was your typical just college campus, dorms, whatever else. I park in the same spot. I'm a creature of habits. Park in the same spot every game. Walk down Tiger Boulevard there, Main Street, whatever. And literally, over the years, I've seen it change. And all of a sudden now you've got these brownstone, no longer like dorms or like ratty apartments, but these beautiful brownstones that look like you're in Brooklyn, New York, Brooklyn as we call it, or Wrigleyville, Chicago. And the campus itself had this, all of a sudden, instead of kids driving like, broken down 83 or, 93, whatever, 20-year-old cars, you see all these kids driving SUVs, Mercedes SUVs and everything else because the wealthy money, primarily from the East Coast, is what Clemson became an it school. And more kids are applying there, and so you're getting more selective in who can go to school there. And that's because they started seeing night games for their football team. And it became an it school. Alabama is an it school. In the early 90s when I was in school, Arizona became an it school because their basketball program was featured all the time on national television, and you're like, man, that looks like an awesome place to go to school. Athletics facilitates that. And that's why when people talk about coaches and NIL money and everything else and athletes getting paid and whatever, what these programs are doing to elevate these schools is you can't put a price tag on it. Notre Dame doesn't need that. It's one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and it also has the religious affiliation that makes it a national, not Indiana, but a national brand. But it was super cool to see their march last year, to see their run, and Marcus Freeman made it enjoyable because he is a guy that you want to root for. And that's why I don't like him, because I don't want to like Notre Dame. The big news earlier today, though, Daniel Jones over Richardson. We get into that full force and back to your reaction to it as well. I promise, at 239-1070. Stephen Holder, bottom of the hour coming up. So, let me recap for you the way the show and the day began. Started out like it was going to be just any other Tuesday, to be honest with you. Stephen Holder was going to join us in the program. He is still set to do so in about 30 minutes. But we knew this decision was coming sooner rather than later. And I will admit, and I will look right here in this camera on YouTube, I will say it over these airwaves to all of you, I will admit that I have flip-flopped like the goldfish at the end of the Faith No More video. Dated reference. I said when they signed him that Daniel Jones was going to be the starter for the Colts. And then when Richardson missed the OTA and they said that that wouldn't be a factor, and then I started watching him play, I thought the ceiling is higher for Richardson. And as a result, I think that's who it's going to be because Jones didn't do anything to separate himself. And in that situation, I had said that the tie goes to the incumbent. And that would be Richardson. And I really did believe that. And I said it numerous times. The tie goes to the incumbent. But the more that you listen to Shane Steichen, and I started to hedge a little bit, because the more I listened to Shane Steichen, the more it seemed to me that Shane Steichen was trying to tell us something. With explanation, with each time that he was deciphering.
It's everything, right? The operation, the communication in the huddle, the checks, getting guys on the same page, the consistency of all that obviously is going to play a big factor in this.
He was telling us something. He was saying, not so fast, my friends, to quote Lee Corso. This is not the slam dunk that you think it is. Just because Richardson has a better arm, just because Richardson's faster, just because Richardson can tantalize you with his versatility. It seemed as though Shane Steichen, each time he was asked about it, not only seemed to pull away a little bit from Richardson, but rather hint towards Jones. And then today, the announcement came.
All right, I'll start off by letting everyone know that Daniel Jones will be our starting quarterback this season. I thought the competition in training camp was great by both of those guys. I thought they both competed really hard, and it was good to see them cheering for each other and battling the way they did. And you guys heard me talk about the consistency, and that's really what I was looking for. And really the operation at the line of scrimmage, the checks, the protection, the ball placement, the completion percentage, I think all that played a factor in it. I think Daniel did a great job doing that, and I think AR has made strides in that area, but I do feel that, he still needs to continue to develop in those areas. And I had a chance to talk to both of them this morning. They were both great. AR was great. He knows that he still needs to develop and learn in those areas, and he knows that he's one play away. Let those guys know, let the team know this morning. Team's very supportive of Daniel, but also supportive of AR and his new role, and he's got to attack it the right way, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. When he says that he is one play away, he doesn't mean that it's that close for Richardson. What he means there is that he is one injury or one miscue away from, when I say miscue, Steichen later went on to say he does not want this to be a short leash. Jones is your quarterback. When he says one play away, he means an injury away from having to go back into the game, meaning Anthony Richardson. But very clearly, Steichen was saying there is still room for growth for Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson had a play against Green Bay. He wasn't playing against starters. He made a really good throw. He completed 8 of 14 passes in the preseason for 94 yards, but he had one play that was a beautiful ball, put it right in the breadbasket, and one of those throws that, like when you're in golf and you hit a shot that brings you back for more. He had a beautiful play. But sometimes there's more to something than what you see on the surface. And the play where Richardson threw that perfect pass right where it needed to be. If you look at it, he had a back, and I think it was Giddens. Might have been Goodson, but I think it was Giddens, Eddie pointed out. But he had a back open. And while the beautifully thrown ball sliced right through the defense, put it right where only the receiver can get to it. Just a beautiful ball. But it was an unnecessary risk because he had a back out of the backfield wide open in an open space with nothing but real estate in front of him. And that should have been, say, his second option. But he didn't go through all of his reads. He took the bigger risk, and it paid off that time. But for a guy that has been careless in turning the football over, you need to see progress, especially against a second or third defense, because that perfectly thrown ball that he made against Green Bay, against third stringers, probably was picked off in the regular season. And it didn't have to be thrown. Even though he did exactly what he needed to do in putting the ball where it needed to go, it was an unnecessary risk. And football oftentimes is about limiting your risks. And then you have the situation beyond that. And I'm talking about every time that Shane Steichen was asked about it, he kept pointing out that it's more than just what you see in the stats. It's more than just putting the football where it needs to be. It's more than just being able to throw off your back foot 65 yards in the air. It's more than just being able to turn a 2-yard broken play into a 6-yard run. It's about what happens inside the building, what happens in the locker room, what happens in the meeting room, what happens in the huddle. And we don't know those things. And Shane Steichen is the man that's been hired to decipher those things. And in that, there's something that either is there or not there that he wasn't comfortable with. So he went with Daniel Jones. Now, I'm going to repeat what I said and what I was thinking about on my way in as all of this went down, because this news came out probably 45 minutes before I'm driving into work. And as I'm driving into work, I'm going to use the same illustration I did earlier. I'm driving down Capitol. And I'm driving down Capitol, and I'm thinking about this news that Daniel Jones is your starter. And I'm driving down, and I'm thinking about the fact that Shane Steichen was hired in February of 2023, knowing that the Indianapolis Colts were about to hire him for his dream job for the first time as a coach in the NFL, and they likely are going to be drafting a quarterback to go with him. And yes, you could certainly, and it is a very plausible and understandable standpoint to have, that Shane Steichen would have, as a result of that, been completely on board with whatever quarterback they went with. So Shane Steichen is hired in February of 23, and in April, 2 months later, they're drafting a quarterback. And yes, theoretically, Shane Steichen has voice in that. But does he? Because when you're going through a job interview process of trying to land your dream job, one of which there's only 32 of them in America, in the world, and you have an opportunity to land one of them, for that first couple months, aren't you going to kind of just go along with whatever the boss says? Hey, we'd like for you to be the manager of this car wash, and you've always dreamed of being the manager of this car wash, and there are only 32 car washes in the United States of America. We want you to be the manager. But actually, what we're looking for is a manager that not only is willing to work 75 hours a week, but is also willing to wax, detail, and white wall cars. You know what you're going to say? Of course. Deep down, you're thinking, I don't want to wax cars. But you're in that interview, right? It's human nature. So Steichen goes into those meetings, and yes, he probably was looking at Anthony Richardson, thinking of Jalen Hurts and what he had worked with in Philadelphia, and he was intrigued by that. There were a lot of things about Anthony Richardson that would wet anybody's whistle, for certain. So Steichen, let's say he's on board, whatever it may be, but he's going to be a little more muted because he's brand new to the job about things that might be of concern. So he comes in, and the Colts in general, and at that time, the late Jim Irsay, rest his soul, is coming off of Andrew Luck. is coming off of Peyton Manning. Those are the last two franchise draftee quarterbacks that the Colts had experienced. And Irsay's saying, look, you hand the keys to the guy and you let him go. You let him grow on the job. And so they do. And they erred. And yes, the injuries were a factor. And yes, there were things of inconsistency in hitting the layups for Richardson, but there were also plays that completely intrigued you. But everything changed last year. And everything changed last year when Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet and came out of a game. And when Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet and came out of a game and then said, I'm not going to lie, I was tired. That was, in NFL speak, a disrespect to the guys on the line. That was, in NFL speak, a disrespect to the receivers who were playing with a bad back. That was, in NFL speak, a disrespect to his coaches who had trusted with him to make the right decisions and do the right things. And Shane Steichen was incredulous over it, and I think internally fuming over it. But he also knew that that is the guy that his general manager selected when the general manager finally was put in a position where he could no longer kick the can when it comes to quarterbacks. And Chris Ballard has been given a lot of rope and a lot of second chances. Chris Ballard came in as the general manager, and Chris Ballard was trusted to make a coaching hire. And he went with Josh McDaniels. And then announced it to the world before there was a contract signed. And he had egg on his face. And he held a press conference and he said, the rivalry's back on with New England. Was it? Was it? Did New England give a second thought about the Indianapolis Colts, who were fading into the wind? So he goes then and he gets a second lease because Jim Irsay says, look, let me call my buddy Frank Reich. I'll call Frank Reich and we'll be good. So he does. And he gets another opportunity at that situation. Then the Andrew Luck, of course, trying to replace that situation at quarterback. And he goes with Jacoby Brissett to kind of, hold water until he figures out where he wants to go. And ultimately, the guy that he picks is he's going to go with Carson Wentz. And he goes with Carson Wentz, and immediately the owner says, I don't like this guy. So he gets rid of him. And then the rest from there. They kicked the can. They went with a couple different veteran options, etc. And Paul the Mailman made a very good point earlier, Giddy Paul. They have been followers. They were a trendsetter when they had Peyton Manning. They were a trendsetter when they had Andrew Luck. Then they became followers, and they tried to do what Tampa had done with Tom Brady and get a veteran quarterback that's got one last lease at life and get Matt Ryan and get Phillip Rivers and get these guys and see if there's gas left in the tank. And then they decided, you know what? Now we'll go with the Sam Darnold mode, the Baker Mayfield mode of a quarterback that just needs a new zip code and they can be reinvented. So they go out and they get Daniel Jones, does Chris Ballard. But Ballard, I think, was getting Daniel Jones because he wanted the safety net in case Anthony Richardson was unavailable from a health standpoint to play. Because the most important thing to keep in mind is this. When it came down to it, when Chris Ballard had to make the most important decision of his career, of his tenure, the quarterback is the most important position in sports in the National Football League. A starting pitcher in baseball is important. A starting point guard in the NBA is important. The most important position in team sports in the United States of America is the football quarterback position. And Chris Ballard finally got to a point where he had to go ahead and show as a general manager that he had the scouting acumen, the judgment acumen, the football acumen, all of that to make the right decision with all of the things that he needed to know in selecting a quarterback. And he selected Anthony Richardson. And there were people sure that said Anthony Richardson didn't have enough time at Florida to show what he could do. Didn't have that he was physically gifted, but those physical gifts limited him from learning the position organically. But those gifts were so strong that you had to go with it. And Chris Ballard fell in love with those gifts at the combine, and Chris Ballard told anybody that would listen, if we had the number one pick in the draft, this is still the guy we would have taken. not move up for C.J. Stroud, not move up for Bryce Young, not settle for Will Levis. And that might have been the right pick still to this day. We don't know. C.J. Stroud looks like a pretty good player, though. But Anthony Richardson was the guy that Chris Ballard, basically, whether he wants to admit it or not, put his reputation as a general manager on the line for Anthony Richardson. And we're in year 3. And I'm driving to work thinking about all of this. And as I'm driving to work, I look up at the JW Marriott. And Eddie's heard me say this like 3 times today. But I look at the JW Marriott, and I see staring down at me and looking over the city and looking over you Colts fans, DeForest Buckner, 20 stories high. I see Jonathan Taylor. I see Kenny Moore. I see Quentin Nelson. And I think good players, all of them. All of them good players in their prime. And then I go one more block, and I see Lucas Oil Stadium before me. And I see the same guys looking down on me. And I realize I don't see a quarterback. Because this franchise still doesn't know for certainty that it has one. And as I look at Lucas Oil Stadium and I look at all of those players, I see 2 things on the stadium. I see a window and I see a roof, both of which open and close. And the window's closed, just like the window in the prime of DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore and Quentin Nelson and Jonathan Taylor is starting to close. And by the time those guys are in a closed part of their prime, it's probably too late to wait on a quarterback. And I see the roof and I notice it's closed too. And I think to myself, that's the Indianapolis tenure of Anthony Richardson. Because you don't go back now. Sure, Daniel Jones, if he gets hurt, Richardson's going to get an opportunity. And maybe if that happens, Richardson balls out. And all this is a moot point. But symbolically speaking, when your head coach, who was brought in because he was a quarterback whisperer, when your head coach, who was on board with the quarterback you brought in, and yes, you can say, in the sake of Chris Ballard, and in the form of Chris Ballard, you could say, part of great leadership is trusting the people that you've hired to make decisions that you hired them to make. And this is one where he said to Shane Steichen, I'm going to let you make this decision. And what Shane Steichen did in making that decision was defer away from the most important player that Chris Ballard has ever drafted. And in doing so, presumably saying, enough is enough. And I don't think you go back. Barring an injury, admittedly, but I just don't see how you go back. And Daniel Jones apparently does all of those things. I mentioned this earlier when I was in St. Louis. When I was in St. Louis and I covered the Rams a million years ago, I realized. But they had a draft class where, Marshall Faulk was there. Marshall Faulk he had left. He had just retired, I think, or he might have maybe been coming off injury. And the Rams used their first-round pick on a running back out of Arizona named Trung Candidate. Trung Candidate had dazzled everybody at the combine, ran like a 4.3 40, had a big year at Arizona. He was their draft pick. And back in those days, for the St. Louis Rams, when you were a media member, and this was kind of cool, we had full reign and access to Rams Park. I mean, I had like an entry card like I'm wearing right here if you were looking on YouTube in our building. I had the same thing for Rams Park. Didn't go into all areas of the building, but you could go in the building at any time. They had a little coffee room, whatever else, and it went right past the locker room. And Trung Candidate couldn't get on the field. He was early in his tenure, early in his rookie year, but he wasn't getting many snaps, wasn't getting many reps. And one day I'm walking through Rams Park, and Trung Candidate is on his hands and knees, on all fours, crawling his way across towards the locker room. And I go, what in the world are you doing? And he looks up at me and says, oftentimes just from running and stuff, my calves and my hamstrings get tired, so I do this to save them, to spare them. Okay? It was a weird thing, and I'm not even saying it was wrong, but it was something that I saw that you could only see if you're inside the building. And I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is crawling around inside the Colts complex, but he's crawling more than he's taking big steps, because he takes baby steps from time to time, but then he also takes steps backwards. And Shane Steichen has seen something inside the building that has led him to believe that he is not comfortable with giving the ball to Anthony Richardson and instead going with Daniel Jones. And in doing so, he has completely turned his back on the most important decision that Chris Ballard made. And Carly Ursay-Gordon had said, it is a nightmare. I think she said nightmare was the word. When you have a coach and a general manager that don't work well together or don't see eye to eye. And she was not talking about these two men. She was not talking about these two men. She was talking about the past and precedent of Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson. And I don't think, in no way, shape, or form, do I think that these two guys are there. And they must clearly have a confidence and a comfort level amongst each other, because Shane Steichen felt comfortable enough to go with the player that is in complete defiance of that Chris Ballard was trusted to be the face of the franchise. Because if you look at that stadium and you look at the JW Marriott, they have no face at quarterback. Now we know who it is. Will he be a face? That remains to be seen. 239-1070, the telephone number. Stephen Holder in just a couple. We'll get to a couple calls first. Carol will join us. Hi, Carol. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm good, Carol. You having a good day today? It's raining outside, right?
Yes, it's not where I am, though.
Okay. Well, where are you, Carol?
I'm in Brownsburg right now.
Okay. Well, we'll have to get out to Brownsburg since it's dry. All right, your thoughts on the quarterback situation,
Is this female listener 25?
I think – oh, wait a minute. Carol, have you called the show before?
No, I have not.
Oh, Eddie, please, if we could, the breaking news center. Carol, bear with us, please. We 25 female listeners. Carol, you are female listener number 25 of this program, and we could not be more thrilled. Your thoughts on the quarterback situation?
Well, I just think Anthony Richardson will continue to get hurt because he doesn't have the decision-making skills needed. And the other day at the game, Jones was making much quicker decisions, I thought. And so I think unless Richardson improves his decision-making skills, he's, number one, not going to be a good quarterback. And number two, he's going to continue to get hurt.
Well, Carol, I think Shane Steichen agrees with you. I appreciate the call, Carol. You call anytime. We are thrilled to have you, and I appreciate your listening to the show. Listen, Carol, Shane Steichen agrees with you clearly. And like I said, you can't have repetition without recognition. And he did not recognize with Baltimore, for example, what was coming his way, and it got him hurt, and it cost him repetition. And I think, to your point exactly, Carol, the Colts said, we just can't have it that way. Paulie, what's up?
How you doing? Hey, you're a good man. I disagree with her, but first of all, I got to get with you and Jake. I got you some magnesium citrate. It's good for your heart and back. I'll get with you next week. Now, I disagree with her on that first preseason game. They put in Anthony and listened to the radio station right here. They put him in with people that never played in an NFL game before, and that's how he got his finger messed up, dislocated.
You know what, Paulie? Here's the thing. You were correct in this, Paulie. What you heard was correct because you called in and said that you had heard that on the broadcast. It wasn't that on the offensive line they had players who'd never played in the NFL. It was that combination of players on the line had not played together on an offensive line before. And with an offensive line, Paulie, that is an important aspect because you got to have cohesiveness for sure.
Right. Well, anyway, it comes to the point where he's got his finger dislocated. So, what the girl last said or something, what gets me is they could have him with Daniel Jones in there, and when it gets healed up, why not, if you have to list somebody as your quarterback, fine, But why not mix it up? Why not keep them both in there?
Paulie, you are not the first one to point that out. It was mentioned earlier. Somebody said they should rotate one to the next, one drive to the next, one play to the next. The bottom line is this in the NFL, and I understand the sentiment. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but unfortunately the precedent would dictate that if you got two quarterbacks, you got none. And because to your point, Paulie, when you're talking about the offensive line and the cohesiveness of that line, the same thing is true at quarterback. I just think that you have to have stability in terms of the style, the expectation, the huddle, the cadence, all of that. You got to go with one guy. And they decided it's Daniel Jones. Stephen Holder joins us next, and then plenty more phone calls. I do want to hear from all you folks that were lined up. I appreciate it. Holder's next. Here we go again. The Colts carousel at quarterback. But it appears as though the carousel has stopped and the roulette wheel landed on Daniel Jones. And so Daniel Jones, Shane Steichen says, will be the quarterback for this season. He also said, and I think it's very important to point out and reemphasize, that in his decision, he made it very clear that this is not something that he anticipates being a short leash. He wants this to be a year-long decision, and Daniel Jones is going to get opportunity from 1 week to the next. And the murky situation now also becomes when you have that backup quarterback that's there and everybody wants that guy to play to see what they can do. If you're going to go through a season where Jones is playing, say, at a mediocre level, then, you know, you could be opening yourself up to a really tough deal. Let's put it that way. My fear, to be honest with you, my fear is simply the fact that the Colts could be boring. I don't want the Colts to be boring. Fans don't want the Colts to be boring. We very clearly, it's in our best interest for the Colts to be exciting and good and competitive. And I'm not saying, does Daniel Jones excite anybody? Are people fired up? That's my concern, is that they could, in fact, be boring. But it remains to be seen. If nothing else, we're full of drama. We're full of drama. A guy that I'm sure has had a full dance card all day long and has been very busy. I can only imagine that Stephen Holder probably today found out just exactly how many editors he has. Joins us on the program on what has been a very busy day. Stephen, I'm going to give you full and complete credit, just like Mr. Hand to Jeff Spicoli. I'm going to leave this on the board for everybody, giving you complete credit, of course, and that is you are, I believe, and we're the first guy that I saw. Kevin Bowen was in this camp as well. But you have been telling us in forecasting, look, read the tea leaves here. Shane Steichen is hinting at the fact that this is a distinct possibility. And now here we are. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, I don't take credit for being smart or anything. What I would say is that, because that's very debatable, but what I would say is those were not random words. They were based on things that he said publicly, things that I had heard privately, and also just knowing Shane Steichen. The things that he based this decision on, which are the things that are not as obvious to you and I, because I've never played quarterback in the NFL, those things are really important to him and actually loom large when he decides, you know, how and who to play at quarterback. So that has had a very big impact here. And I think it makes it difficult for the average fan, because what we saw on the field, and I asked Shane Steichen this, you know, pretty bluntly. I said, Shane, I watched every practice. He wasn't better than Anthony Richardson. You got to do a better job of explaining this. But I just think that in his mind, these things matter so much that he is willing to maybe forego some playmaking for the consistency in those particular areas. So I think that's where he came down on this whole thing.
Afterwards, Stephen, when Shane Steichen clarified that he does not want this to be a short leash, if you had to guess it, give me the situation and the time frame in which we see Anthony Richardson under center, if we do.
I think they got to start losing. That's basically it, and it has to be sort of the vintage Daniel Jones, which is this: a guy who will certainly complete more passes than Anthony Richardson, but it sometimes can be the illusion of efficiency. Okay, we oftentimes traditionally, you know, sort of define efficiency as, you know, we look at the completion percentage and things like that, but frankly, that's just part of it. And I think the telltale sign there for me is that Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones had almost the exact same QBR last season. And there are other efficiency metrics that are very similar between them as well. And that is despite Daniel Jones having a significantly higher completion percentage. And you know what? So what? It didn't matter, right? So what I am saying there is if the Colts start struggling and there is a direct correlation to the quarterback play, then I think you have to make a change. I will also add this, for the optics of this, the first 2 games are at home. Well, what's going to happen in those 2 games if and when Daniel Jones struggles? The boos are going to cascade from that stadium because fans want to love Anthony Richardson. I think they want to see it through, and right now they feel like they're not getting that chance. So I don't know whether that's going to matter, but I'm just telling you that's going to be a thing.
Stephen, okay, to me, and I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. I sent this tweet earlier. This is Shane Steichen passing on, pardon the pun, the most important draft selection in the tenure of Chris Ballard. And he said, I'm good. I'm going to go with, admittedly, a guy Chris Ballard went out and signed.
Right. Well,
how do you, if you're Anthony Richardson, how do you come back from that?
I don't know. I don't know that you do. Okay, and I think I'll take what you said a step further. And this is important. There were 2 people in this building, outside of which I'm sitting right now. There were 2 people in this building who were the biggest proponents of drafting Anthony Richardson. One of them was their lead scout, Morocco Brown. He's no longer with the team, so it doesn't matter what he felt at the time now because he's no longer here. The other guy was Shane Steichen. They were number 1 and number 2 in some order. And so that gives you the context here. Okay?
But, okay, go ahead, and then I'll tell you my counter.
I'm just right. So my point is he believed in him until he didn't.
Right.
and he is trying to deliver the message that, this isn't the end. And maybe it's not, right? I mean, stranger things have happened. But if you're Anthony Richardson, why would you put any stock into the idea that you have a future here?
But you got one guy, one of the guys that you mentioned that was a proponent is gone and was fired, right? We don't know why.
Right.
The other one just walked back, if that's the case, his own thought process, right? Ballard is the guy that ultimately has to make the decision. As I mentioned earlier, Shane Steichen at the time, let me tell you my thought on this, Stephen, and feel free to tell me why I'm completely wrong, okay? Steichen at the time that they were going through that process had been on the job for 8 weeks. I don't know about you, but if I am granted for the first time an opportunity within my dream job, of which there are only 32 of them, I'm going to go along with whatever it is the GM is wanting me to go along with.
True, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened. I think there was some deference to Shane Steichen as the guy who was going to have to build an offense to accommodate Anthony Richardson, the guy who was going to have to coach him and develop him. And I think this is just me saying this. I think if if Shane Steichen would have been of the opinion, I can't make this work with this guy. He doesn't have it.
Well, I get that.
That would have carried some weight. It would have carried some weight.
But do you think he would have said it?
Do
you think he would have said that? I mean, you just get that job. If you don't believe that that's the guy, are you really, and you've been hired to groom whoever the guy is, are you really going to say, guys, that this is not the one? I can't do this.
Right. I don't know, but I would also remind everybody that he could not wait to put him in the starting lineup. He could have held off, which they have now, tried to do a little revisionist history on and say, oh, well, maybe we should have waited. The Colts saw Anthony Richardson play. Shane Steichen saw Anthony Richardson play 1 quarter of preseason football in the preseason opener in 2023. He walked in here on Monday morning and said, all right, he's our guy. He's our starter.
How much of that do you think Stephen, I've always wondered this. How much of that is the fact that at that time, I mean, rest his soul, but the late Jim Irsay was still not only around but was involved, and he had seen not once but twice the Colts draft a franchise quarterback and had success handing him the keys. So why not go with what works?
Well, I think even Jim understood, though, that that this guy was different. This was not Peyton Manning nor Andrew Luck. And I don't know. A lot of this we'll never know, right? I mean, unless people decide to be just completely honest or we get somebody drunk, right? So we won't know all of these answers. But fair question, certainly, about Jim and his stance and his influence, perhaps. Who knows?
Are we having this conversation? Are we having this conversation if Anthony Richardson does not tap his helmet?
I don't think that helped. I think it probably brought us closer to this. I don't think it all traces to that, though. I think, in fact, I would argue that the other things that happened in that game probably loom a little larger. And when I say that, what I mean is him sort of getting overwhelmed with some of the bad reads he made in that game. And that was sort of rock bottom for him, right? He had that pick six down with his back to the end zone. To that point, though, I would also say Shane Steichen has to coach to the player to some degree, right? In the closing seconds of the first half, why are you throwing out of your own end zone with a guy who's swimming and is overwhelmed at that particular moment? Be that as it may, I don't think there was any one event that led us here. I really think Shane Steichen is a guy. I wonder if I can explain this accurately. Shane Steichen is a guy who is extremely confident in his ability to scheme things up and to call the right play at the right moment. Extremely confident. In his mind, I believe that he thinks if I get a guy that can just execute and do all the little things that I want, I can get us where we need to go. He might be wrong, but that's the kind of confidence that he has. So that plays a role here too.
Do you think Stephen Holder, our guest, ESPN.com, where you can read his work, and of course ESPN Television, I've got a feeling he's going to be, you'll see him there as well a lot here in the near future. Do you believe, Stephen?
Yeah, like 20 minutes ago.
Right. I was going to say.
But go ahead. You're good.
Do you believe that, well, here's the thing, Steve, let's be real. If you taped that 20 minutes ago, it's going to be airing like 64 times in the next 3 hours, right? I mean, let's be real.
We got a few. Yeah, go ahead.
When you look at this situation, is it possible that this is Shane Steichen's last Hail Mary to wake up Anthony Richardson? Or did Anthony Richardson hit the snooze button one too many times, and that's that?
Well, I don't know about the second part, in terms of Anthony not doing his part. I mean, look, he could have done more. Let's be clear about that. He could have done more and should have done more. But I would also say I think everything here points to this being about everybody realizing there's too much at stake, and I'm not rolling the dice on Anthony Richardson. That's what I take from this. I really do. I think I asked Shane Steichen directly. I said, this seems like a very immediate decision and not versus like a long-term decision, right? The long-term decision, in my view, is you play Anthony Richardson. Like, why would that even be a conversation, right? You have a young guy. You need to find out about him, as you said, as everybody already knows. They elected to not do that, to play a guy on a one-year contract who probably is not your future. Why? Because you think he's a better path. He gives you the better path, the more likely path to winning right now. That's it. That is the only reason for this. I think if you're taking a step back, if you're taking this, if you're looking at this from a long-term view, this is 1,000% the wrong decision. But that's not the viewpoint with which they made this decision.
Did Daniel Jones win the job, or Anthony Richardson lost it?
He won the job because he was better at the areas that Shane Steichen cares about more. So I'm giving you a caveat answer, but that's the answer. I think between the lines, Anthony Richardson won this job. My fear, though, is that, look, now Shane Steichen's not wrong to really care about those aspects of the job, okay? I want to be clear. Like, that, when stuff gets hard or you're in the 2-minute offense and the quarterback just has to know certain things and all those things, like the 7-year vet's going to be better at that, right? And that stuff matters, right? Because you're going to be dealing with the Mike Vrabels of the world, or whoever the defensive coordinators who give quarterbacks trouble are. So I get that. However, here's the thing. All that's great, but ultimately execution is great and all that, but I worry about this, if you want to play devil's advocate. when it's 3rd and 8, and you got to have it, and the left tackle blows a block, and now the quarterback is running for his life, and he's got to make a play. What do you want with the ball in their hands in that scenario? And the thing about it is that's not every play, certainly, but that is football. That's football, okay? What you draw up doesn't matter one damn bit on Sunday, because a lot of the times it goes out the window. So that's going to be the question here. Can they have this controlled environment where Daniel Jones, executes and runs all of Shane Steichen's cute plays, or do they find themselves with a quarterback, or with a situation where the quarterback has to make a play to win them games, and they find out he can't do that?
Stephen Holder, ESPN.com. You can read the work. You will see him on ESPN television as well a lot, I can tell you, between now and certainly the beginning of the season. A very busy day, Stephen. I appreciate you squeezing us in.
All right, you got it.
He's back on the list for Pacer games, Stephen Holder. That was the bribery. He's back on the list. Of course, we have to make sure we get tickets first. But we'll come back. Your phone calls. We'll hand it off to John as well, other side. Happen to have the breaking news sounder. This just in from the Indiana Fever. The Fever announced today that guard Sophie Cunningham will miss the remainder of the 2025 WNBA season after suffering an injury during the team's game at Connecticut on Sunday. In a corresponding move, the Fever have signed guard Shea Petty to a 7-day hardship contract and released guard Kyra Lambert. Petty, a 6-year WNBA veteran, most recently appeared with the LA Sparks and is a former defensive star within the WNBA. We've been talking also about the news with Daniel Jones, the starter for Anthony Richardson. Josh wanted to chime in quickly before we hand off to John. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me on. First of all, as a season ticket member, I don't care who's on the marquee of anything. It doesn't bother me. Second of all, the Colts gave up and Steichen gave up on Richardson. He's never going to recover from this. And Steichen just wanted to save his job and went with the sure thing, as we would say. But I'm not happy about this decision. They gave up on Richardson. And for Steichen to come out and say he just needs more reps. How do you get more reps with second teamers than first teamers? I mean, first team is where you get your good reps, not with second team.
Yeah, all I'm saying about with the marquee, Josh, is the fact that if you have a quarterback that you have any belief in whatsoever, he's going to be up there. You know what I mean?
I'm just saying that doesn't bother me as a season ticket member, but as a season ticket member, I am upset at Shane Steichen for making this Looney Tune decision.
Okay. And listen, Josh, I think a lot of people agree with you, and it's going to be interesting to see, especially if Daniel Jones struggles in the first two home games. I mean, you got Miami and Denver. If he struggles in one or both of those, then yes, I agree with Steven that more people are going to be like Josh and voicing their opinion. JMV has arrived. John, big show lined up?
Oh, boy, can't wait here. So is this somebody just sent me this. Is it Indiana Jones and the Season of Doom?
That's good.
I will say this. The one outlier to all this is even when you're comparing two bad quarterbacks and they're vying for the same job, it's a bold move to make with that final decision on Jones with Steichen because, everybody thought that the easier route would have been Richardson.
You're right.
I don't know if it would have been prosperous, positive. You're going to get the results, but it would have been the easiest choice to make right there. So I think you just said something that probably is impactful, is that they see and trust something in him that maybe we don't, because I'll be damned, Jake, I didn't see a difference in either one of these dudes.
Like I said,
not 1 ounce. And nobody out there that covered them every single day during training camp can tell you that they did.
Right.
All that they say is that they're getting, these bits and pieces from Shane Steichen, who really was trying his damnedest not to say anything whatsoever, and just kind of
But he kept saying, John, there's just more to it. There's more to it. It's the totality. It makes you wonder what there has to be something like.
But there's always, but it's the organization that always has more to it, and nobody delivers less with more to it than this organization.
This is fair.
This to me, and I said this in this video that we sent out, wherever the hell that is now. But they should have just hit the reset. Yeah, hit the reset button last year. I would rather have a dude like Jackson Dart or somebody like that right now that at least you can give, okay, he's a rookie and you can go. This is purgatory. This is absolutely, positively it. And I think most people out there are sick of it. We're grasping at straws with Daniel Jones. You're going to be grasping at straws with Richardson. And here we are once again.
My worry is they're just going to be in that vat of boring mediocrity. But we shall see.
Oh, they're going to be boring. There's no doubt.
John's up next. He'll be with you until 3. We will be back with you at noon. Thank you to Scott Agnes. Thank you to Stephen Holder. Thank you to Ella Rhodes from WTHR for coming in and paying a visit as well. Thank you for listening to Query & Company.